Hello, welcome back to the Clara CFO Group channel. Today we're going to discuss PPP fraud, actual fraud cases, things that have been brought up specifically by the FBI. They are either in investigation right now or in some cases, these criminals who have stolen from this federal program have already been sentenced to jail time. So I wanted to bring these cases to you today just to kind of enlighten and show what happens when people are using this program in an inappropriate way. And I also kind of would just want to discuss how they got the money in the first place, because what we're seeing from a lot of the arguments that we're having with this whole program and how it was distributed is people are saying, well, if the SBA gave me the money, then it must mean that I should have it. So because of that argument, if the SBA gave the money to me, I am allowed to have it. Because of that argument, we are seeing a lot of people in jail, and also just because people are committing intentional fraud. But I wanted to kind of have this conversation today because I think there's a lot of discussion around the program. Yes, there's been gross misuse of the funds, but most of the funds have gone to actually support small businesses to help them through the COVID-19 pandemic. And some of this has been used for not so great purposes. So I wanted to kind of talk through some specific cases and, maybe we'll get a little bit of a chuckle out of this, like why somebody was able to do this. But mostly this is pretty serious. I mean, we're talking about jail time here. We're talking about millions of dollars in restitution. We're talking about people's whole lives changing and, going a totally different direction because they made some poor decisions. And some of these people, well, really all the ones we're going to talk about, took deliberate steps to defraud the program, and they're paying, and they will pay the consequences for it. So these are the ones that got caught. Now remember, whenever there's a crime, there's always the people who don't get caught. So we know that this is rampant. We know that there's other people who have also been using these funds both in inappropriate ways and got funds they never should have gotten in the first place. So we're going to talk through some of that. And I also want you guys to keep in mind that we're talking about some of the larger loan sizes because those are the ones that are making the news. But I've actually been looking at a lot of lists of frauds and things that have occurred. And some of these that have actually been prosecuted are things that are much lower than you would expect. So a lot of the fraud we're going to talk about is over $2 million. But some of the ones that have actually been prosecuted are under $150,000. So nobody is free from being investigated in this program, okay? So I just want to make sure that that is clear to everybody. We all have to be held accountable to the things that we certify on these applications. We're going to go through 5 cases and kind of talk about them and say what's going on here. Ultimately, these are people's lives. I don't want to take it lightly. Somebody is going to jail for this. Somebody's, spouse is going to jail. Somebody's dad is going to jail. These are, real people's lives. So I don't want to take it lightly. Okay. So I just want to say, ultimately, when fraud occurs in something like this, what this does is it takes money away from the program that could have been used in other ways. Any fraud. Because almost never do the funds get fully recovered and come back into the program. So especially in this situation with the PPP, it's not like because we caught somebody who had a $5 million PPP loan that now there's going to be $5 million now put back into the program. It takes time for the FBI and all the other federal agencies to go and investigate these crimes, and then we've got the prosecution of them. So there's tons of legal fees involved, and I'm not saying, and even if they could recover some of this money is essentially gone. This is not money that's going to be reinvested into the program. So we don't talk about this thinking, oh, we're going to get some more money so we can redistribute it to the people who need it. In a lot of cases, this money has been spent. This money is gone. There is just no way to recover it whatsoever. Now, in the cases of some of this luxury goods, maybe they could be liquidated, but ultimately all of that doesn't mean that it's going back into the PPP program. So I'm not trying to give you guys any hope that maybe there's going to be some more money once we get all these, fraud charges prosecuted. But I do want to just mention that. Okay, if you have gotten this far, please go ahead and subscribe to the channel if you aren't already, because that'd be great. I'd love to have you here. And just click the little notification bell if you'd like to know when a new video posts. We try to do 2 videos a week here, and we've been pretty consistent on that. So trying to bring you guys information that will be helpful for your small business as you grow and ultimately help you be financially successful and stay away from fraud. Okay, so let's go ahead with the first case, okay? The first one I just looked up. This is a Southern California man. He got $5 million from the PPP program. And I think at this point, we should probably say that if you're waltzing into the Lamborghini dealership and you're buying a Lamborghini, especially with cash, we might need to be looking into whether or not you also received a PPP loan. Because this man not only got a Ferrari, a Lamborghini, and also a Bentley, he also still had about $2 million left over in his bank accounts. So in this case, this man actually did not even have any businesses. He went to 3 different banks and submitted applications for 4 businesses that did not exist. So we're talking about major issues here. We're talking about falsifying records. We're talking about creating false companies. I mean, false tax documentation. Like, you guys, this is just, the extent of this is beyond, I mean, it takes a lot of creativity to come up with all of this, but he ultimately got $5 million out of this program. And remember, this is all fake documentation that he submitted, to the SBA to get these loans. So, this goes back to that argument. If you think that just because you got a loan means that you should have one, we have to question that. Okay. So this man, 38-year-old from California, basically is on his way to prison, bought a bunch of luxury cars, and he was caught. So thank goodness that he was, but also a lot of waste in the process. All right, the second one that I want to bring up to you is actually local here to me here in Washington State. This guy was in Issaquah. Issaquah is in this greater Seattle area region, and this man just decided to apply for 9 fraudulent loans. So this is between the EIDL and the PPP. He put in 9 fraudulent applications and falsified tax documentation. And out of that, 6 of his applications were approved, and he was able to obtain $700,000. All right. So, this goes back to like those thresholds. He was probably submitting applications underneath that threshold level so that he wasn't triggering any like big red flags. The loans over $2 million have a lot of extra scrutiny over them, but he was trying to sort of skirt around that to get this money. And, he did. He got a lot of money out of it. But ultimately, he's been found out. Sorry, buddy. Not going to work out for you. All right. The third one. Now we've got a Florida man story. Florida man defrauds the PPP program for $3.9 million. This guy was only 29 years old. 29 years old, defrauding the federal government of $3.9 million. That is a bold move. He basically created a fraudulent application claiming millions of dollars in payroll costs that never existed for employees that never existed. And what did he do with the money? He bought a $318,000 Lamborghini. And thankfully, a lot of it was still sitting in his checking account. So all of that was brought back into the system. But obviously, like we talked about before, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going back into the PPP program. But you guys, I don't know. I honestly don't know what people are thinking. What are they going to do? They've created this big company and, submitted fake tax documentation for all of this payroll taxes they've never actually paid. And then, it's all just supposed to work out for them. So I don't honestly know how people think they're going to get by with it. But, ultimately the sad part is a 29-year-old has now kind of put a black mark on him for the rest of his life with this situation. And he's got 6 years in prison now because of this as well. All right, we've got another 29-year-old, this time in California. And this guy also kind of created, I guess there was an existing business, but basically he falsified payroll records to inflate the number of employees, inflate the amount of average payroll so that he could get a larger loan. So he got this loan, and it ended up being for $1.8 million and ended up Actually, he was trying to flee the country. He was actually obtained in the LA airport as he was trying to leave for Dubai. About a little less than half of this money went back to his home country of Uganda, as he was not even a citizen of the US. So this one is actually kind of interesting because this one actually got Homeland Security involved because of the international issue there. And you know, I mean, he faces up to 20 years in prison for these charges. All right, well, this last one is kind of the one that has probably been in the news a little bit more than some other ones. This is actually a reality TV star. This is somebody who was on the show Love and Hip Hop in Atlanta. And this guy, his name's Maurice Fain. I haven't been saying everybody's names, but this guy, he's already famous because he's a reality TV star. He got a PPP loan basically by falsifying payroll of his trucking company, and then quickly, once he got the funds, started using it for all sorts of personal expenses. So, okay, I have to read this to you guys because this one, he just went to town on this with everything he spent the money on. So here's the thing, like, he got $3.7 million, and when you apply for this money, remember all these certifications we've been talking about for so long. And when we're certifying to how we're going to use the money, we say that it's going to be used for eligible purposes. So such as maintaining payroll, and we check the box for what we're going to use the money for. Remember that? Remember that? So he said he was going to use the money for payroll, mortgage interest payments, lease payments, utility payments, and so on. But here's how he used the money. So $40,000 in past due child support, $50,000 for restitution owed in a previous fraud case. What do you do? $65,000. The irony of that is kind of funny, don't you think? Okay, $65,000 in cash withdrawals, $85,000 for custom-made jewelry, $136,000 to lease a 2019 Rolls Royce, $230,000 to associates who helped him run a Ponzi scheme, and $907,000 to help an associate start a new business. I wonder what kind of business that was. This one actually, I feel like you have to laugh at a little bit because, it just kind of, it always comes back to like, a tiger doesn't change his stripes all the time. And, if you are having to defraud a program to pay for your fraud previously, it's just, like I said, the irony of this is just a little bit too much. So with that, I mean, the agents seized basically all of his assets from his business and any cash that was in the account. Obviously, the down payment that was used for the Rolls Royce, seized the residence, and then just so happens that he had just bought himself a nice big diamond ring, a diamond bracelet, and a Rolex watch. So, all of this stuff, when individuals are, committing fraud, it doesn't just, it's not like you only stop it at the business, at the business assets. Like if he owned something as an individual, that is on the table too. There's no line once you commit that crime. And, I'm not a lawyer here, but, once you commit that crime, it's not that they can't come back and also look at your personal assets. So, there's no protections here when you are, committing a fraud like this. Okay. So you guys, I tell you these stories just because, yes, they're interesting. And, we need to know that actually this stuff is being prosecuted. This stuff is being looked into. And when I was looking at some of these fraud cases, we were seeing some things, especially unemployment fraud, being prosecuted at the much lower dollar levels, like $40,000, things like that. So, nobody is free from being looked into here. If you have applied for one of these loans, you are on the table as a potential investigation risk, okay? You have submitted and certified under perjury. You actually signed something that said that you are using this money correctly and for the intended purposes. So what we're seeing from this is we're seeing a couple things. people are getting accused of fraudulently using the money for, misapplying, or not misapplying, for fraudulently applying. They basically created fake businesses or fake payroll in order to get the money. But then also, they're also being charged for misusing the money. And if you remember, if you go back to our interview with Jeff Grant, you'll remember that he got the money legally, but he misused the funds, that the funds for an EIDL grant or, an economic injury loan, I forget exactly if that's exactly the program that he was using. It was an SBA emergency fund. Those funds were used inappropriately. He used them to pay personal expenses. Now, even if in this situation that Mr. Fain had gotten his money correctly, if he had still misused it and gotten the lease from the Rolls-Royce and done all these things, paid off child support, paid off the debt, blah, 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 that's still not appropriate use of the PPP funds. The PPP funds, no matter what, are supposed to be used for intended purposes. And remember, at least 60% needs to be used for payroll costs. Okay, so if you're not doing that, then you are on the table for potentially misusing these funds. Okay, so I just want to make sure that you guys are well aware, you are keeping all of your documentation proving that you have used this money correctly, whether or not you have to submit it to the bank or you don't, depending on the size of your loan when you go to apply for forgiveness. And even if you've chosen to not pursue forgiveness, you are still on the hook for those certifications that you made. Okay? Just because you said, hey, I'm not going to ask for forgiveness, doesn't mean that you can't use that you can use that money and go buy yourself a Lamborghini. Okay? Okay? I'm going to wag my finger at it one more time. I don't want anybody going to jail, you guys. That's why I'm doing these videos. So I want you guys to, stay out of jail, please. I also just, in closing, if you feel like you maybe have used these funds fraudulently, whether or not intentionally or not intentionally, or you were planning to use them in a way that maybe might be considered fraud in the eyes of the SBA or the FBI, you might want to go ahead and repay those funds right now. Before you do anything and you get the temptation to actually do it, you can go ahead and just repay the loan before you make any wrong steps, okay? So it is not too late if that is the case. Just know that that is an option available to you, okay? All right, well, hopefully nobody's there, but just in case. All right, thanks so much, you guys. See you soon.